It is Friday. It's the 4th of July. You're watching Arirang, Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gun-young. Chinese President Xi Jinping has spent his second day in Korea underscoring his country's commitment towards ties with Seoul in meetings with South Korean lawmakers. And an economic and trade forum for officials and businessmen from the two countries is about to begin as we speak. Now, both Presidents Park and Xi plan to make their case to the business leaders today. Let's find out what more is on the Chinese leader's itinerary for the remainder of his state visit here. Our presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun is live on the line. Yoo-sun.
Pyongyang, the big event today is the two countries' economic and trade cooperation forum, where both leaders will address some 500 Korean and Chinese officials and businessmen. President Park will stress the need to diversify bilateral cooperation from its current focus on the manufacturing sector. She will also propose Seoul and Beijing work together toward realizing her Eurasia initiative of linking energy and logistics infrastructure across the continent.
Now, Yoo-sun, I understand that there were talks on a proposal for Seoul, Beijing, and Tokyo to work together on researching Northeast Asian history. Am I correct?
Right. Earlier today, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Korean National Assembly Speaker Chung Eui-hwa and responded positively to Chung's proposal to set up a trilateral historical research committee with Japan, emphasizing the need for the three Northeast Asian neighbors to share the same historical perspectives. The speaker talked about a three-nation committee that would one day jointly publish school textbooks. And to that end, the Chinese leader said the committee would serve to correct historical misunderstandings involving the three countries. The comments come at a time when the Abe administration in Tokyo continued to deny its imperialist atrocities. Beijing, locked in a bitter territorial dispute with Tokyo, has been pushing for more cooperation with Seoul on historical issues. Chung then expressed his hopes to invite his Chinese counterpart Zhang Dezhang to Seoul, to which President Xi said he plans to suggest to Zhang more frequent exchanges and active dialogue between the two parliaments. And before the business forum, President Park also hosted China's first couple for a luncheon to further showcase the amicable relationship between Seoul and Beijing. Just before wrapping up his Seoul visit later today, President Xi will also meet with Chinese residents here in Korea. I'm Choi Yoo-sun reporting on President Xi's state visit to Seoul, and I'll be back with an update in our next newscast.
And the Chinese president also spent this Friday morning addressing a group of students at one of Korea's major universities. Now, there he emphasized the strong ties between South Korea and China, but he also highlighted Japan's militarist past there. Our Kim Young-gil has more.
President Xi Jinping became the first Chinese president to speak to a group of Korean students at a local university on Friday. In an address to some 500 students at Seoul National University on Friday, the Chinese leader vowed to further strengthen bilateral relations between Seoul and Beijing through this strategic cooperative partnership. He reaffirmed China's opposition to a nuclearized Korean peninsula, saying the two Koreas should seek a peaceful solution through dialogue. He used strong words to recount the suffering of China and Korea under Japan's militarism in the early 20th century, describing Tokyo's actions as barbarous wars of aggression against the two countries. He said that when the war against Japan was at its height, the Chinese and Korean people experienced a shared suffering and gave sweat and blood to help each other. The Chinese president's evocation of Tokyo's military past is seen by many as a call for Korea and China to confront Japan over its denials of history. He also said that both countries could deepen their mutual understanding by diversifying their cooperation in the culture arena.
China will open up a new horizon in China-Korea relations as China will pursue peace and cooperation between the two countries. China and Korea must cooperate in order to open up new opportunities. We will strengthen cultural exchanges in the humanities and liberal arts. This will help foster friendly ties among the people of both countries.
President Xi said Korea and China are each other's closest partner, biggest investor, and most favored place for travel, which has led to rapid growth in Korea-China relations. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Well, Chinese President Xi Jinping has also proposed a joint commemoration with South Korea, marking the 70th anniversary of two events in 1945. China's victory in the Second Sino-Japanese War and Korea regaining its independence from Japan. China's foreign ministry announced Friday that during the Seoul-Beijing summit, President Xi said it was possible Korea and China could hold commemorative events together next year to mark the 70th anniversary of the two milestones. When asked about the proposal, Korea's presidential office spokesperson didn't give a clear answer, saying he could not confirm specific details of the summit. In meetings with world leaders earlier this year, President Xi is known to have emphasized that 2015 marks the 70th anniversary of China's war of resistance against Japan.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gong-yong. Every weekday, only on Arirang.
Meanwhile, after months of government-level talks, the Abe administration is keeping its promise with North Korea and has lifted some of Japan's sanctions on the communist state. Now this, while North Korea launches a reinvestigation into the fate of Japanese citizens abducted to the north decades ago. Here's our Hwang Sung-hee with this report.
Following a cabinet meeting Friday, Japan formalized its decision to relax sanctions against North Korea. These include lifting travel bans to and from Pyongyang, raising the reporting limit for money taken or sent to North Korea, and allowing port calls by North Korean ships to Japan for humanitarian purposes. In response, North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency announced the launch of what it called an all-inclusive and comprehensive investigation to determine the fate of several Japanese citizens abducted to the north decades ago. The 30-member special investigative team, headed by the country's Vice Minister for State Security and led by the powerful National Defense Commission, will be granted a special right to probe any organization in the regime. In 2002, North Korea admitted to abducting 13 Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s to help train their spies, but Japan believes even more people were kidnapped. South Korea and the United States, Japan's key allies in countering North Korea's nuclear ambitions, have been calling for transparency in the separate dealings to prevent any friction in their trilateral cooperation. But whether Tokyo and Pyongyang's recent overtures will lead to a concrete shift in regional dynamics is keeping the world on edge. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Upon President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul, Beijing has decided to release hard evidence of Japan's wartime atrocities to highlight its past wrongdoings. The Chinese government has also begun revealing confessions by Japanese war criminals and will continue to do so every day for a total of 45 days. Now, be warned that there is a disturbing image at the start of this report by our UDN.
The photo shows one of the horrific crimes by Japan's Unit 731. Wearing protective suits, two Japanese soldiers are seen pouring chemicals on a 5 to 6-year-old girl who is writhing in agony. This is just one of the 450 documents revealed by China's State Archives Administration on Japan's biological and chemical warfare during World War II. The fact Unit 731 used poison gas against Chinese soldiers is also described in the document. China has long accused Japan of denying its wartime wrongdoings, and in what's being seen as a timely move, China is releasing evidence of Tokyo's wartime crimes on the occasion of President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul. On top of the hard evidence, Beijing decided to release confessions of 45 Japanese war criminals, each one for 45 days, on its State Archives Administration website. The handwritten confessions include one that says Japan kidnapped 20 women from Korea and China and used them as prostitutes for Japanese troops.
These archives are hard evidence of the heinous crimes committed by Japan's imperialism against the Chinese.
An editorial from China's official news agency People's Daily added weight to the move, saying Beijing needs to open the eyes of right-wing extremists in Japan who are denying history and breaking the nation's decades-long pacifist constitution. Yurian, Arirang News.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average smashed the 17,000 mark for the first time on Thursday, buoyed by a June jobs report that far outstripped analyst expectations. The U.S. economy added almost 300,000 new jobs, which helped drive the unemployment rate down to its lowest point in nearly 6 years. Here's our Kim Ji-yeon with this report.
Workers in the U.S. finally have something to celebrate. American jobs growth was stronger than expected last month. The U.S. economy added 288,000 jobs in June. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics on Thursday. It helped drive the unemployment rate down to 6.1% from 6.3% in May. It's the lowest rate since September 2008.
I have no doubt that relative to the first quarter, the next 3 calendar quarters, including the second quarter, will be a lot stronger, and this employment report is consistent with that view.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average topped 17,000 for the first time Thursday, and the gains were broad, confirming expectations that the U.S. economy recovered in the second quarter after a dismal start to the year. The S&P 500 climbed near the 2,000 mark. The Nasdaq closed at its highest point since the year 2000. But investors will have to wait until next week, though, to see if the gaining streak is going to continue, since there's no trading on Friday as it's Independence Day in the United States. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, Korea's cumulative trade surplus with the U.S. reached $137 billion from year 2000 to the first quarter of this year. In a report Thursday, the U.S. Department of Commerce says, apart from a deficit of $200 million in January 2000, every quarter in the 15-year period was in the black for Korea. Well, for the entire year of 2000, the trade surplus amounted to $11.5 billion, rose significantly by 2004, before gradually dropping in 2010 and hiking even thereafter. Now, the surplus in the first quarter of this year stood at $2.6 billion. Economic experts attribute the ongoing surplus to the popularity of Korean automobile and IT products in the United States, but they worry a continued trade imbalance could result in an excessive appreciation of the won against the dollar. Korea and the U.S. were the 6th largest trading partners bilaterally in 2013. Well, the Korean shipbuilding industry, however, has retained its number 2 spot in the global shipbuilding industry behind China, but that margin between the two is growing. According to UK-based Clarkson Research Services Friday, Korea's global market share dropped to 27% from 32% in the first half of the year, while China's share was over 44%. Korea logged only 5.5 million compensated gross tons in new global ship orders in the same period, which is down nearly 30% from a year earlier. The domestic shipbuilding industry also lost ground to Japan last month. Japan had nearly 26% of new global orders in June, while Korea had just over 16%, putting it in third on the list for the month. Industry experts say a weaker yen has contributed to the growth of the Japanese market amid a slowdown in the global shipbuilding industry. Sales of imported cars in Korea surpassed 94,000 units in the first half of the year, up nearly 27% from last year. The Korea Automobile Importers and Distributors Association said Friday that sales of new imported cars in June increased nearly 40% from the year before, on the back of strong demand for foreign brand cars. The annual sales for foreign brand cars could even surpass the 200,000 mark in the second half of the year, when car sales typically increase. Now, European cars were some of the most popular, and nearly 70% of new cars sold in the first 6 months of the year were all German brand cars. Luxury brand BMW led the pack, followed by Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi. Now, not so good news here. Wealth polarization is expected to worsen globally, and Korea is no exception. A new OECD report says the gap between the rich and the poor in Korea will be the third widest of 29 member nations by 2060. Well, the report goes on to say that the income of the top 10% in Korea was 4.85 times bigger than the bottom 10% in 2010 when it ranked fourth. It says the disparity will widen over the next 50 years, with the income of top earners to be nearly 6.5 times that of those at the bottom of the scale. Well, Israel is expected to top the list, followed by the U.S. And the OECD attributes the widening gap to highly skilled workers benefiting from technological advances. Let's get back to Chinese President Xi Jinping's state visit to South Korea. During their bilateral summit Thursday, leaders of Korea and China agreed to accelerate efforts to remove tariffs on each other's products. And this is expected to give the much-needed momentum to the ongoing Seoul-Beijing FTA negotiations. Well, China is Korea's biggest export market, while Korea is China's third largest trading partner. First, here's our Song Ji-sun. She reports on the impact a free trade deal could have on the Korean economy.
Chinese President Xi Jinping, in a joint post-summit press briefing with President Park Geun-hye on Thursday, emphasized their will to wrap up negotiations for a bilateral free trade deal by the end of this year. Delegations from the two sides, who have already held 11 rounds of talks, will try to hammer out their remaining differences later this month. The two leaders expect the free trade deal to increase two-way trade to $300 billion next year, from $230 billion in 2013. With shipments to China accounting for 1/5 of Korea's exports, the finance ministry expects Korea's GDP to rise by up to 3% over the next 10 years after the FTA takes effect. Korean automakers will benefit the most, as the free trade deal is expected to gradually remove the 22.5% tariff China levies on foreign cars. But Korea's agriculture and fisheries industries could be slammed by an influx of cheap Chinese products, with some exports predicting an annual output fall of some $3 billion. The Korean side wants to exclude as many agricultural products as possible by designating them as extremely sensitive items. Farmers here have urged the government to draw programs to compensate for an expected surge of Chinese products that already take up the lion's share of imported food. If Seoul and Beijing successfully conclude the trade pact, Korea will have established free trade deals with the world's three most influential economic powers: the U.S., the European Union, and China. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Well, during their summit in Seoul yesterday, President Park Geun-hye and Chinese President Xi Jinping agreed on various measures to boost the already flourishing economic and business relationship between the two countries. And the two leaders are currently attending a Korea-China Investors Forum as we speak. Let's take an in-depth look at some of the biggest economic achievements for President Xi's state visit to Korea. Professor Jung Jin of Catholic University of Korea joins me live in the studio. So welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Expectations were running high at the beginning of the summit and the state visit that there would be a huge, at least economic achievements on that front, only highlighted by the size of the business delegation that President Xi Jinping traveled with. Now, let's first talk about the prospect of a free trade agreement. Of course, boosted by yesterday's summit talks, we are expecting a momentum to be gained there on the FTA negotiations. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, it was very interesting that they did set, it was not a hard deadline, but still they'll try it by the end of the year. Right now, the negotiations sort of bogged down. Korea wants to protect its agricultural market. China doesn't really want to open up its manufacturing market as much, so negotiations have been slowing down. This is expected to give a good kick to the negotiations, but we have to remember that the issues are hard. So there's still a chance that it won't be finished by the end of the year, but at least the negotiators will have more incentive to work things out. Another problem would be that the Koreans want to go into the Chinese services market, and China has been very reluctant to open that as well. That may not be possible by the end of the year because, well, China has a lot of domestic service problems to work out. So that's another factor that's coming in.
Well, Presidents Park and Xi, in their joint communique yesterday, announced the establishment of a won-yuan, a direct, direct trading market here in Seoul. This is, of course, aimed at promoting greater use of the Chinese currency. Now, what is the significance of this agreement, and what kind of impact do we expect from this this new direct trading market? Okay,
allowing that direct currency trade market, as well as establishing Korea as a RQFII, renminbi qualified foreign institutional investor.
That's a mouthful.
That I think is an important development, even though it's technical in nature. What that basically allows you to do, the RQFII allows you to invest directly in the Chinese markets, and the direct currency market allows you to change won and renminbi directly instead of going through the dollar. Now, the only two other financial markets which have both of those things is London and Taiwan, and the amount that we were given under RQFII, the amount that we could directly invest into China, is the same amount as London. So we've been given the same status, at least in terms of China, as the largest financial market in the world.
Right.
So that's a very significant, I think, event. And I think that shows that China believes that Korea can be a good long-term investment partner. So instead of just going in short-term and coming out, we'll be there for the long-term and we can grow together. From Korea's point of view, this allows the Korean financial institutions to make more Chinese economic financial goods, which are based on the Chinese financial markets and economy. And that will make us more competitive, not only within Korea, but also globally, because only London and Taiwan will be able to offer some similar type of investment goods. Also, because we will have the direct currency trading market, the cost of Korean firms going into China will be lessened because we don't have to pay as many fees. And also, well, Korea has been very dependent on the dollar.
The US dollar.
Yes, US dollar. And about 80%, more than 80% of all Korean foreign dealings were made with the dollar. That's partially why we have to have a large dollar foreign reserve. Well, if we can do more business with China, using their own renminbi, then we could focus away from the dollar a bit, and we won't be as vulnerable to the dollar-won exchange rate changes.
Well, that's I suppose that is part of Korea's goal to diversify the foreign currency here in Korea. And my understanding is that it took decades for London to gain that status, and it only took less than a year for Korea to gain a similar status, at least in terms of Chinese yuan. So that is a feat there, right?
Yes.
Now, excuse me, also high on the agenda for the two presidents during Xi Jinping's visit to South Korea this time around is, of course, the joint investors forum that we were mentioning before, which the two presidents are believed to be attending at the moment. Now, we know that the Chinese president traveled with the biggest business delegation that Korea has ever seen in terms of Chinese business delegation. 250 of them, and some of them carried big heavyweights like Alibaba and whatnot. Now, the two leaders attending this investors forum together, does that hold a significance?
Well, any investment will have to be made between the investors, the companies, individuals. The government can only encourage them. So I think this gives them more opportunities to meet, more opportunities to find mutual opportunities. I think some of the news coming out seems to say that China is interested in certain Korean industries which we thought maybe they wouldn't be very interested in. So I think that gives...
Such as
the real estate rental market. They've been going in Jeju area a lot, but now they're thinking of expanding into Seoul area. Now, as you know, Korea has had a depressed real estate market for a long time. Maybe the influx of foreign investors will invigorate the market somewhat if some regulatory rules can be worked out. And because the presidents are meeting, perhaps those kind of law changes or regulatory changes can be facilitated. Also, another one is movies. China has a very strict movie import policy. I think they only allow about 20 foreign movies to come in each year. But if there's more Korea-China co-production, then those movies are not covered by that quota. So they can go in the market and have a large proportion of the market without just American or European competition.
Well, definitely China, regardless of which sector it is, China is a huge market that Korean businesses can tap into. And the bilateral relations, the boosted bilateral relations between the two nations will definitely give a further boost to the economies as well.
Oh, yes. China is our largest trading partner now, so this will be a great opportunity.
All right, Professor Jung Jin, thank you so much for today.
Thank you.
And that is your business today on this Friday. Thank you for watching, and do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.